get started with our conversations on CARICOM, and most of all, welcome home and welcome back Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong. Ambassador, good morning.
Good morning, Pearson, and thanks for that very warm welcome back home.
Oh, you're very welcome. We missed you. We missed you. And there's been so much.
I'm touched.
You know, but it's the truth. But there's been so much happening in CARICOM and so much that you've been on the forefront of. A report, sir. Where have you been?
Yeah. Well, my first trip was to the 10th summit of the Association of Caribbean States in Colombia, Cartagena, on the Caribbean sea coast of Colombia. And that delegation was led by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Kerry Simmons. You know, the Association of Caribbean States is an association that is broader than CARICOM. It is CARICOM Plus. CARICOM Plus Central America, CARICOM Plus the northern part of South America. But it was the brainchild of CARICOM. You know, we came up with the idea. So we feel a responsibility for it. So that was the 10th summit, heads of government, heads of state. I then came back to Barbados, spent 4 hours in Barbados, and then I was off to Dutch St. Maarten to deliver the keynote address at the Caribbean Studies Association. So that was very interesting, and I think I have a little clip of what I said in that keynote address. And then it was back to Barbados, but then back out again to Guyana for a CARICOM meeting at the Secretariat, a meeting of our Council for Trade and Economic Development. And once again, that delegation was led by our Foreign Minister. In fact, he chaired the meeting of the Council. We called the Council Co-TED, and we were able to, you know, do some work on behalf of Barbados at that Council meeting.
If you don't mind, I want to go to the middle meeting in Dutch St.
Okay.
Maarten. Yes,
Okay.
if you don't, that meeting, because that's one I paid very close attention to. It was the meeting of the Caribbean Studies Association, and it was a coming together of people of color, people of like mind, people of a similar history, and it focused on an ideology. What was that ideology?
Well, I mean, it's all about the ideology of regionalism, of Caribbean regionalism. Apparently, this association of scholars was established way back in the 1970s. I think the Barbadian scholar Hilburn Watson, who is a very distinguished political scientist, who has applied his trade in the US for many years. I think he was one of the founder members. So it's been going for a very long time. It's just a very powerful gathering, bringing together all of these specialists in Caribbean studies. And every year there's an annual conference. They move from territory to territory. To give you an example, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood of Barbados, he was one of the presenters at the conference. Yes, so they invited me to do the keynote address. I was happy to agree to that, and I also did serve on a panel on decolonization, and to me that's a topic that's very dear to my heart, because I am firmly convinced that we have an overriding mission to totally decolonize and unify our Caribbean region. So I was able to speak at that panel, and I always use the experience of Barbados. Whenever I have to argue a case for why countries should jettison that colonial status and move to full independence, I'm always happy to use Barbados as a very positive example of the progress that can be made as an independent nation. So I would say the Caribbean Studies Association is all about exploring our Caribbean civilization. We looking at ourselves through our own eyes and exploring all aspects of our civilization. And as I said at the conference, I would like to see more Barbadian participation. Not just, I would like to see participation beyond the academic community.
Right.
So for example, I would like to see officials of our Division of Culture, our National Cultural Foundation, our Ministry of Education, you know, policymakers. I would like to see policymakers there rubbing shoulders with the academics and benefiting. And I would also like to see some of our senior secondary school students, community college students, also there and benefiting from the experience. So that's something, that's a recommendation I'm going to take forward.
Perhaps when it's held in Barbados, right?
Yes.
Good. So from your speech, there's a portion we pulled that we want to share, and then I want you to give us the rationale behind it so that we get a true sense of its weight and its gravity and its import to all of us. Let's take a look at a portion of what Ambassador David Comissiong would have delivered at the Caribbean Studies Association's recent meeting as he delivered the feature speech.
Constructed, and the fundamental idea is that Africans are not human. So this is an ideology that we have been fighting for centuries now, this evil ideology. And you know, I don't know about you all, but in 2020, when there was that public lynching of George Floyd, and that public lynching of George Floyd sparked an upsurge in Black Lives Matter activism, not just all across the United States, but all across the world. I must confess, I felt and I said publicly, look, the world has turned a corner. The world has turned a corner. There's no going back. The people of the world have, in fact, come to an understanding that Black lives do matter, that this anti-Black prejudice and discrimination is evil, and we are going to progress from here onwards. Did you all feel the same way? I felt so. I saw masses of, I saw people on the streets in cities all over the world raising the banner that Black Lives Matter. And I said, you know, we have broken the back of this. We have finally, that 8 minutes, that televised 8 minutes of that public lynching shown on television screens all across the world, I felt that it had done its job, and that we were going to go forward. And then, to my utter disappointment, you began to see the push. You know, the rise of fascist parties and regimes in Europe, the rise of Make America White Again in the United States. And it has been very, I mean, we now have to face the reality. And now we see Gaza. And we see that brown lives don't matter. And if brown lives don't matter, what is the implication for Black lives? And so, you know, this is something that we're going to have to deal with in the reparations.
If brown lives don't matter, what's the future for Black lives? And so that's, and it's of the speech delivered, the feature speech delivered at the Caribbean Studies Association's meeting in Dutch St. Maarten recently by Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong. We're continuing our conversations on CARICOM. That's a very powerful statement. If brown lives don't matter, what about Black lives?
Yeah. Well, I had been asked to speak about reparations. And I thought I wanted to look at this terrible myth that is at the heart of the victimization and discrimination against Black people. This concept of Europe and the West being elevated and the rest of us being lesser than. And in fact, this notion of Black people as lesser than, and I was forced, of course, to go into the history of Barbados to make, you know, to outline Barbados's evil contribution, really, to that evil notion. And I had to begin my speech by reflecting on Gaza and the transparent genocide that is going on in Gaza. As Prime Minister Motley said, the world's first televised genocide. And you're forced to ask the question, how could these European elites, you turn on your television screen, you see this genocide, you see these terrible images, and yet you, far from denouncing it, I mean, you continue to facilitate it. You continue to send weapons to Israel and to give Israel political support. So I pose the question, well, these Palestinians, these are brown people. And this phenomenon is telling us that in the eyes of some of these elites, brown lives don't matter. And so what is the implication for black people if brown lives don't matter? Anyhow, so I looked at that whole notion of the West and the superiority of the West and the inferiority of black people. I dissected it. I showed it is a bogus notion. And then I went on to say that we really, as part of our reparations campaign, we have to attack that notion of the superiority of the West and the inferiority of black and brown people. It is critical that we deconstruct and dismantle that whole notion. And so I was making the point that I was a happy camper when, the whole world responded in such a positive way to the lynching of George Floyd. And I really thought, we had broken the back of this thing. We had made a critical breakthrough. But in the years since then, we have seen that perhaps this is not the case, and we still have to fight that battle.
In traveling across the region recently, he's sat in on some very, very important critical sessions as well, part of which dealt with what we just ended with in our previous session, looking at the whole question of this first live televised genocide, Gaza. And so what did we glean from all of that? What could we glean from all of it?
Well, it was so appropriate that I made that a centerpiece of my address, because since then there have been several developments on the issue of Gaza. In fact, even before I went to St. Maarten, when we attended the Association of Caribbean States Summit in Cartagena, Colombia, that was one of the live wire issues on the agenda. In fact, it proved to be something of the controversial issue, because the association wanted to pass a declaration on Gaza. And in fact, a declaration was drafted, but only 5 countries were able to commit to the declaration: Barbados, Colombia, Cuba, St. Lucia, and Venezuela. And it was a declaration basically expressing concern over the terrible and unprecedented increase in violence unleashed by Israel in Gaza and the West Bank, but and calling for an immediate ceasefire. But I guess the paragraph in the declaration that caused some disquiet for some countries was agree that the actions carried out by the Israeli military forces constitute genocide against the Palestinian population, for which Israel must be held criminally accountable for crimes against humanity. End of quote. Now, I don't know why, after all that has happened to the Palestinian people and the clear evidence of the atrocities, I don't know why that should be controversial. But it was only these countries that were able to sign on to that paragraph. But then it goes on to speak about, emphasize that the upcoming Conference on Palestine, titled High-Level International Conference for the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution, to be held in the coming weeks at the UN, will be an opportunity to take decisive action on this matter and call on all governments not to miss this unique opportunity. So that was the stance we took at the summit of the Association of Caribbean States. Subsequent to taking that stance, we had the United Nations Security Council trying to pass a resolution for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. all the 14 member states of the UN Security Council voted for it, with the exception of one, the United States of America. They vetoed it. And as a result of that veto, the UN General Assembly then held an emergency session and on the 12th of June, calling again for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And I must tell you, in that General Assembly vote, all of the CARICOM states voted for the resolution, with the exception of Dominica, who abstained, and Haiti, who was absent. So the General Assembly did pass that resolution, which basically is in tandem with what we were saying at the Association of Caribbean States conference in Colombia. But
so we just wait to see.
we wait, well, you know, not only do we have the atrocities in Gaza, but now we have Israel's attack on Iran. So it's almost, you know, from bad to worse. And it's a terrible situation that the world is in, and we can only try to play our part. We don't have any big military. What we have is principle.
Yes.
And as small states, we simply have to keep talking truth to power, speaking principle, and hoping that some sanity and humanity will prevail in this world.
And CARICOM is playing its part. We have to leave it there, Ambassador. I know we wanted to go on to do the COTED in Ghana, but we out of time. But I really want to thank you for the report. It's a very rich, impactful number of weeks that you've had in your movements across the region, advocating on behalf of Barbados and really on behalf of the region. And we're seeing pockets of success, but we know how life is. There's always something else that pops up. And so because you have the fervor and because you have the passion and because you have the interest, I know that you'll be able to help us find solutions.
Yes, we keep on doing the best that we can. Maybe next week I'll be able to come and give a report on that COTED.
Yes.
And some developments there that are very relevant to the Barbadian people. But yes, we have to keep our Caribbean community together. We have to be a community of principle, and we have to be determined as small states to play our rightful role in international affairs. Yeah.
Well put, well said. Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong. That's been our conversations on CARICOM.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.